Well, it's been a year since January 6th. Conflicting narratives dominate the news. What are those narratives, and who is pushing the false one? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Tomorrow marks the one-year anniversary of the Capitol riot on January 6th, 2021. That's right, it's only been a year. This last year has been the longest century of my life. And a year later, we still can't stop hearing about the riot. In fact, there are even plans to commemorate it tomorrow. A lot of plans. CNN is going to air a special episode called Live from the Capitol, January 6th, 1 year later, which no one is going to watch. Trump supporters are planning vigils all across the country to support those who have been detained in connection with January 6th. And there will be January 6th themed parties across the U.S., which is just when people crash other parties, take a bunch of stuff, cause a ruckus, and flee before the cops grab them. Turns out I've been January 6th themed parties since college. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has announced plans for a solemn observance of the first anniversary of January 6th. Pelosi has invited all the members of Congress to her activities, which include, among other things, a prayer, a pledge of some sort, a statement from the chair, a moment of silence, and a moderated conversation between two historians to establish and preserve the narrative of January 6th. Establish and preserve the narrative? Doesn't that sound a bit, Soviet? Nancy Pelosi has big, invites you to a book club where she tries getting you to join an MLM scheme energy. But Nancy Pelosi isn't the only one interested in establishing a narrative. We've seen a lot of narratives develop about January 6th over the past year. A lot of them developed within the first 24 hours. And I'm not even including the script for the eventual movie Hollywood's gonna make about this, starring Mark Wahlberg. For our commemoration of January 6th, let's take a look at some of those narratives. Let's start with the narratives coming from the left, since the left has a lot more to say about it. Like that January 6th was an insurrection.
But I am afraid, because what powered this insurrection, what fueled it, was a president and many others complicit in spreading the big lie.
This is treason. This is treason. This is insurrection. This is rebellion. Period.
Police showing the battle between rioters and police during the insurrection.
It is exactly 11 months to the day since the January 6th insurrection.
Despite the fact that an insurrection is, by definition, organized, and the FBI found scant evidence that any of it was organized. Of course it wasn't organized. Just look at their outfits. Come on, guys, I thought we decided on a patriotic Viking theme. Did none of you read the group chat? It was also a threat to our democracy that was perpetrated by white supremacists.
The national intelligence infrastructure of our country has to take the threat of white nationalism very seriously.
Working to get to the bottom of the relationship between the white supremacist movement and domestic terrorism. Lawmakers again today focused on the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
So they're saying that white nationalists tried taking over so they could turn the White House into the even whiter house. Finally, some have called it the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War, or perhaps since the War of 1812. For shame, I thought we were supposed to never forget 9/11. Oh wait, they remembered it, and are saying 1/6 was actually worse.
The worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
The worst attack on our capital, the citadel of this democracy, since the War of 1812.
150 days since the worst single act of political violence since the Civil War.
The worst attack on American democracy, arguably, probably since the Civil War.
The greatest attempted insurrection since the Civil War.
The 1/6 attacks are likely to kill a lot more Americans than were killed on the 9/11 attacks.
Though there was less loss of life on January 6th, January 6th was worse than 9/11.
Some of those video clips are from as recently as a few days ago. Look, the only way 1/6 was worse than 9/11 is that we're never going to see a January 6th gift shop. You know the terrorists didn't win because a 9/11 gift shop is the most American thing I've ever seen. So the message coming from the left is that what happened on January 6th was an attempted rebellion against the US government. But there are alternative viewpoints. Some argue that January 6th was not an insurrection, while others quibble over whether or not it was an armed insurrection. FactCheck.org states that the protesters were armed with a variety of weapons. PolitiFact claims that the January 6th Capitol assault was indeed an armed insurrection. And the Puffington Host argues it was definitely an armed insurrection because all of the insurrectionists, except for a couple of military vets, had 2 arms. Thanks, Puffington Host. Meanwhile, Real Clear Politics maintains that there is no proof January 6th was an armed insurrection. A lot of this debate comes down to differing definitions of the word armed. Now, legally speaking, the Capitol protesters were armed because several of them had weapons, mostly improvised weapons, such as flagpoles, fire extinguishers, a crowbar, and a podium. And if you don't think a podium can be a weapon, you've never seen a fight involving WWE star Peter the Professor Porter. What politicians like Representative Louis Gohmert most likely mean when they say it wasn't an armed insurrection, however, is that given that the protesters were nearly all Republicans, these guys could have looked like this, but they didn't. Others have taken on the comparisons between January 6th and the War of 1812, arguing that January 6th was not the worst assault on the Capitol since the War of 1812. And still others have addressed the comparisons between January 6th and 9/11, with one snarky blogger writing, 9/11 was bad, but it wasn't QAnoners wandering around the Capitol for a few hours bad. So, armed insurrection, white supremacists, worse than 9/11. Those are the key narratives coming from the left. What are the narratives coming from the right? We'll address that after the break. Welcome back. So what does the right have to say about January 6th? Well, according to the right, what happened on January 6th was a setup. It was designed to make conservatives look bad, which is ridiculous, because if you want to make conservatives look bad, all you have to do is remind everyone that they consider Cracker Barrel fine dining. The alleged setup possibly involved Antifa.
We really don't know who is behind this. I guess you could call these, for lack of a better word, Antifa-like tactics. We don't know if Antifa is out there.
If Antifa was there, we need to root it out and to make sure that that's called out because it shouldn't be blamed on groups that weren't responsible.
I heard those reports, too, about possible Antifa infiltration.
Because it's always Antifa. Why is there lipstick on my collar and an earring in our bed? Clearly, this is the work of Antifa, honey. But it may not have been Antifa. It may have been the FBI.
Were any of those people who broke glass and did damage to those doors working for the FBI or other federal law enforcement entities?
This is an ongoing criminal investigation, and I'm really not at liberty to discuss.
We still don't know how many federal agents were involved in the events that day on January 6th, but we have very good reason to believe from court documents that it's a significant number.
Yep, these definitely look like guys in the FBI. And by that, I mean guys who'd wear female body inspector shirts. So I understand the confusion. Now, to be fair, the FBI did admit that they had informants in the crowd on January 6th. But that's not the same thing as the FBI saying they orchestrated a setup. The FBI often seeds informants in large protests just to keep tabs on things. That's how we know the adult men protesting the cancellation of My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, are super creepy. Although you probably didn't need an FBI investigation to figure that out. Either way, whether orchestrated by Antifa, BLM, the FBI, or some combination of the three, some right-leaning sources believe that January 6th was a false flag operation. There are counter-arguments for those claims as well. USA Today claims to have debunked the FBI false flag narrative, while Reuters said they've debunked the Antifa narrative. Although some guys swear to their wives that Antifa is still behind the lipstick on their collar. But articles and 24-hour news cycles simply aren't enough to contain these narratives. They have a life of their own that has spawned multiple documentaries, each with its own unique take. We'll talk about those after the break. Welcome back. In addition to the narratives spun by news articles and newscasts, there are a number of documentaries about January 6th, each with its own narrative. There are documentaries that lean left.
Pure chaos. He has razor's edge heart attack, traumatic brain injury.
Take away their weapon.
There were two groups in there on January the 6th. Clearly, the ultra dangerous, those who were trying to execute a coup against the United States. But there was another group, namely the delusional, those who have totally embraced these wild, online, very toxic conspiracy theories.
What happened next was chaos.
They broke the glass.
Insurrection.
Take it now!
Death.
And there are documentaries that lean right.
I saw with my own eyes what happened that day. And what they show you on the media doesn't tell half the story.
An insurrection? Without arms? What are they talking about? And why are they lying?
False flags have happened in this country. One of which may have been January 6th.
I'm starting to think that Spider-Man: No Way Home was actually a documentary, because there are definitely people in this country living in completely different realities. Notably, the dangerous extremist insurrection narratives are coming from some of the most well-known mainstream media sources, whereas the setup and false flag narratives are mostly coming from small independent media sources. Mostly. So, where do we go from here? The debate over what really happened on January 6th rages on. No one is convincing the other side that their narrative is the truth. And both narratives can't be true unless it was a planned false flag that just so happened to occur during a planned dangerous insurrection. Which is too ridiculous to be true, although it would explain these clashing outfits. But everyone seems to agree on one thing. January 6, 2021 was super important.
We can now add January 6th, 2021, to that very short list of dates in American history that will live forever in infamy.
That day will be another day that lives in infamy in American history, similar to Pearl Harbor and 9/11.
And how can we find out? How can we make up our minds for ourselves? It's clearly a significant day in American history. It's being used to change the country. So maybe we should get to the actual facts of that day. What are they?
It was a day that will live in infamy, a significant day in American history. But whether or not it was an insurrection, it has come to represent something more, something bigger. Something that touches on the very core of what it means to be American. And that's the narrative that we're really stuck with. At least until the Mark Wahlberg movie about this comes out. So what do you think? Who's pushing the false narrative? Let us know in the comments. And remember, we can only do what we do because of viewers like you. So please visit our Patreon page. Contribute $1 or more per episode so that we can keep making great episodes. I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.